What if everything you learned about humanity's greatest achievement was a carefully constructed lie? What if the moon landing, the moment that defined an entire generation, was nothing more than smoke and mirrors? Today, we're going to examine evidence that has been suppressed, ignored, and ridiculed for over 50 years. Evidence that suggests something went terribly wrong in 1969. Something the government never wanted you to know. By the end of this video, you'll question everything. The photographs that defy the laws of physics. The astronauts who returned as broken men, refusing to speak about what they saw. The missing evidence that conveniently disappeared. The transmissions that were suddenly cut off when something appeared that shouldn't have been there. If you're ready to go down this rabbit hole, to question the narrative you've been fed your entire life, then subscribe to this channel. Because what you're about to discover will change the way you see history forever. Let's begin. July 20th, 1969. The world watched as Neil Armstrong descended the ladder of the lunar module and spoke those famous words. But while billions celebrated, a small group of photographers, scientists, and engineers noticed something deeply wrong with the images being broadcast from the moon. The shadows don't make sense. On the moon, there is only one light source: the sun. This means all shadows should be parallel, pointing in the same direction. But in photograph after photograph from the Apollo 11 mission, shadows fall at different angles, sometimes intersecting, sometimes pointing in completely opposite directions. This is physically impossible unless there are multiple light sources. Multiple light sources like you would find in a television studio. Look at the photograph of Buzz Aldrin standing next to the American flag. His shadow extends to the left at roughly a 45-degree angle. The shadow of the flag extends almost straight back. They're standing mere feet apart. How is this possible with a single light source 93 million miles away? Professional photographers have studied these images for decades. Stanley Kubrick, the legendary film director who was known for his obsessive attention to lighting, allegedly studied the Apollo photographs. According to witnesses, he became visibly disturbed. He never spoke publicly about what he concluded, but those close to him say he was approached by government officials before the moon landing. They wanted his expertise in creating realistic space scenes. He died in 1999, just days after completing his final film. Some say he was silenced. Others say he was finally free to reveal the truth. He did neither. Then there's the flag itself. In the footage, you can clearly see it waving, rippling as if caught in a breeze. But the moon has no atmosphere. There is no wind. NASA claims the flag was wrinkled from being stored and that the movement came from the astronauts handling the pole. But watch the footage carefully. The flag continues to move even after the astronauts have stepped away, even when no one is touching it. It waves. And the stars? Where are the stars? In every photograph taken on the lunar surface, the sky is completely black. Not a single star visible. NASA's explanation is that the camera exposure was set for the bright lunar surface and the suits, making the stars too dim to appear. But astronauts on the International Space Station, using similar camera settings, have captured thousands of photographs with clearly visible stars. The Apollo astronauts were on the moon for hours, taking hundreds of photographs. Not one shows stars, unless they weren't on the moon at all. Perhaps the most disturbing anomaly appears in the reflection on the astronauts' visors. Enhancement of these images reveals shapes that shouldn't be there. In one photograph, Buzz Aldrin's visor reflects what appears to be a large studio light on a stand. In another, you can see what looks like a boom microphone hanging above. NASA has never adequately explained these reflections. They simply dismiss them as equipment from the lunar module. But the angles don't match. The shapes don't match. The more you look at these photographs, the more impossible they become. It's as if someone created them knowing they would eventually be discovered. As if they wanted us to know. Or as if they had no choice but to fake what they couldn't achieve. But why? What would drive the most powerful nation on Earth to orchestrate the greatest deception in human history? The three men who allegedly went to the moon returned as heroes. Parades were thrown in their honor. They were celebrated around the world. But something was wrong with them. Something had broken inside. Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, became a recluse almost immediately. He refused interviews, avoided public appearances, and spent the rest of his life teaching engineering at a small university. For a man who had achieved the impossible, he seemed determined to disappear. In the rare interviews he did give, he appeared uncomfortable, evasive, and at times genuinely frightened. In 1994, at a White House ceremony, Armstrong gave a speech that has puzzled conspiracy researchers for decades. He spoke cryptically about truth's protective layers and encouraged young people to remove one of truth's protective layers. What did he mean? What layers was he referring to? He never elaborated, but his choice of words was deliberate. This was not a man celebrating his achievement. This was a man burdened by a terrible secret. Buzz Aldrin's descent was even more troubling. After returning from the moon, he suffered a complete psychological breakdown. He battled severe depression and alcoholism for years. In interviews, when asked about the moon landing, he would become agitated, sometimes angry. In 2002, when confronted by a conspiracy theorist who called him a coward and a liar, Aldrin physically attacked the man. This was not the behavior of someone proud of their accomplishments. But perhaps Aldrin's most disturbing moment came during a recorded interview with a young girl. She asked him, "Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?" Aldrin's response was chilling. He said, "Because we didn't go there. That's the way it happened." He paused, seemingly realizing what he had said, and then added confusion about missions and timelines. The original footage of this exchange has been removed from multiple platforms. What remains are fragments, endlessly debated. Then there's Michael Collins, the astronaut who stayed in orbit while Armstrong and Aldrin descended to the surface. His accounts of the mission have changed multiple times over the years. In early interviews, he described feeling completely alone, out of radio contact with Earth and his fellow astronauts for portions of each orbit. But in later interviews, he claimed he never felt alone and that communication was constant. These aren't minor discrepancies. These are fundamental contradictions about his experience. There are also reports, unverified but persistent, that all three astronauts signed non-disclosure agreements upon returning to Earth. Not standard debriefing protocols, but legally binding documents threatening severe consequences if they ever revealed what truly happened. Former NASA employees, speaking anonymously before their deaths, have confirmed that such documents existed. They describe meetings where astronauts were explicitly told what they could and could not say about the mission. What were they threatened with? What did they see up there? If they went at all, that was so terrible they could never speak of it. In leaked audio from the Apollo 11 mission, there are moments where the transmission to the public was cut, but internal NASA communications continued. In these fragments, you can hear Aldrin's voice, tense and frightened. "They're watching us. They're on the ridge." Armstrong responds, "They're parked. I can see them." Then silence. When the public transmission resumed, the conversation had changed to mundane technical matters. Who was watching them? What was parked on the ridge? NASA has never released the full, unedited audio of the Apollo missions. They claim it's for technical reasons, but former employees tell a different story. They say the tapes contain conversations that would destroy the official narrative. Conversations about things that were seen, things that were waiting for them. What do you think happened to these men? Why did they return broken? Share your thoughts in the comments. In 2006, NASA made a stunning admission. The original recordings of the Apollo 11 moon landing, the most important footage in human history, had been lost. Not misplaced temporarily. Lost. According to NASA, the tapes were likely recorded over during a data shortage in the 1980s. The only visual record of humanity's greatest achievement, erased to save money. Does that sound believable to you? These weren't ordinary tapes. These were the original high-resolution recordings, far superior in quality to the broadcast footage the public saw. NASA had copies, of course, but the originals, with all their detail, all their potential evidence, were gone. Convenient, but some footage survived. And in that footage, there are moments that NASA cannot explain. During the live broadcast, there were several instances where the transmission was suddenly interrupted. The official explanation was always technical difficulties, signal loss, routine problems. But the timing of these interruptions is suspicious. They occurred during moments when the astronauts were describing something unusual, something that didn't fit the script. In one instance, Armstrong is heard saying, "There are other ships here. They're lined up on the far side of the crater." The transmission immediately cuts to static. When it returns, Armstrong is discussing routine geological samples. What ships? Whose ships? Ham radio operators around the world, listening to frequencies near NASA's transmission band, picked up fragments of conversations that were never broadcast to the public. One operator in Australia recorded audio where an astronaut, voice filled with panic, says, "Mission Control, there are lights. Lights everywhere. They're not ours. They're moving." The transmission cuts off. The operator later received a visit from men claiming to be NASA officials. They confiscated his equipment and warned him never to speak of what he heard. There are dozens of similar accounts. Radio operators, technicians, people who were listening that day and heard things that were never meant for public consumption. Most were silenced. Some disappeared. A few, on their deathbeds, finally told their stories. Then there are the documents. In 2014, a cache of internal NASA memos from the 1960s was leaked online. They were quickly scrubbed from most sites, but researchers managed to save copies. These documents revealed that NASA scientists had serious doubts about the feasibility of the mission. The technology didn't exist to protect astronauts from solar radiation during the journey. The lunar module was underpowered and untested. The risks were astronomical. One memo, dated May 1969, just 2 months before the launch, states bluntly, "Current estimates suggest a less than 40% probability of mission success without catastrophic failure." They didn't think they could do it. So how did they? There's also evidence that Stanley Kubrick's film studio was visited by CIA operatives in early 1968. Kubrick had just released 2001, A Space Odyssey, which featured the most realistic depictions of space and the moon ever created. His techniques for simulating zero gravity and lunar landscapes were revolutionary. Witnesses say Kubrick was brought in for a classified project. He signed documents. He never spoke of it. But after 1969, his films became darker, more paranoid, filled with themes of government deception and hidden truths. Some researchers believe Kubrick left clues in his later films, particularly The Shining. In one scene, a child wears a sweater with Apollo 11 clearly visible. In another scene, room 237 features prominently. The moon is 237,000 miles from Earth. Coincidence? Kubrick didn't believe in coincidences. The most disturbing piece of evidence is a photograph that surfaced in 2009. It allegedly shows a film set with a lunar module mock-up, studio lights, and a painted backdrop of Earth. In the corner of the photograph, barely visible, is a man who looks remarkably like Neil Armstrong. The photograph has been analyzed by experts. Some say it's authentic. Others say it's a forgery. But no one can prove either way definitively. NASA's response to all of this? Silence. Dismissal. Anyone who questions the official narrative is labeled a conspiracy theorist, ridiculed, and ignored. But the evidence doesn't go away. The inconsistencies don't disappear. The questions remain unanswered. Thank you so much for staying with me this far. I know this is disturbing. I know it challenges everything you've been taught. But you need to hear this, because what comes next, what we're about to discuss, will make you question reality itself. You won't believe what really happened. So what's the truth? Did we go to the moon or didn't we? The answer might be more terrifying than you imagine. Theory 1, we never went. The entire mission was filmed in a secret location, possibly Area 51 or a facility in the Nevada desert. The motivation was the Cold War. The Soviet Union was winning the space race. America needed a victory, real or fabricated, to prove its superiority. The technology didn't exist to safely send men to the moon and return them, so they faked it. Kubrick directed the footage. The astronauts were complicit, threatened into silence with promises of wealth and fame or threats against their families. The missing tapes were destroyed because they would have revealed the deception under modern analysis. This theory explains the photographic anomalies, the impossible shadows, the waving flag, the missing stars. It explains why the astronauts behaved so strangely afterwards, burdened with guilt and fear. It explains why no other nation has sent humans to the moon since, because the technology still doesn't exist, at least not publicly. But there's another theory, one that's even darker. Theory 2: we did go to the moon. But what the astronauts found there was so disturbing, so inexplicable, that the government decided the public could never know. So they went to the moon, they landed, they explored. But when they arrived, they weren't alone. There were structures there. Ancient structures, or perhaps not ancient at all. There were lights. There were ships, as Armstrong said. They were being watched. The footage broadcast to the world was a recreation, filmed beforehand in a studio as a backup in case the mission failed or in case what they found needed to be hidden. The real footage, the footage showing what was actually on the moon, was classified at the highest levels. The astronauts returned traumatized, not from the difficulty of the journey, but from what they witnessed. They were sworn to secrecy. They saw something that proved we are not alone. Or worse, that we've never been alone. This theory explains why the astronauts broke down psychologically. It explains the cryptic warnings, the strange behavior, the contradictions in their stories. It explains why NASA lost the tapes, because those tapes showed too much. It explains why we haven't returned, because we were told not to come back. There are whistleblowers, former NASA employees, and military personnel who, on their deathbeds, have spoken of what they saw in classified briefings. They describe photographs of massive geometric structures on the lunar surface. They describe footage of crafts that are not human in origin. They describe an agreement made in secret to stay away from certain areas of the moon. An agreement with whom? They die before they can finish their testimony. Consider this. In 1969, we allegedly sent men to the moon with technology less powerful than a modern smartphone. We succeeded on the first attempt with no loss of life. And then, for over 50 years, no nation has repeated this feat. China, Russia, Japan, India all have robust space programs. None have sent humans to the moon. Why? Is it because it's too expensive? Or is it because they know something we don't? Is it because they've been warned? In 2009, NASA deliberately crashed a probe into the moon's south pole. The stated purpose was to search for water. But researchers noted that the impact site was carefully chosen to avoid several areas of interest. Areas where anomalies had been detected in earlier surveys. What were they avoiding? What didn't they want to disturb? There's also the matter of the photographs taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has been mapping the moon in high resolution since 2009. These photographs show the Apollo landing sites, including tracks and equipment left behind. NASA presents this as proof that we went. But look closely at these images. The quality is surprisingly low for modern technology. The details are blurred. And in several images, there are objects that don't match the official equipment manifests. Objects that NASA has never explained. Then there are the rocks. Moon rocks were brought back and distributed to museums and research facilities around the world. But in 2009, it was discovered that the moon rock given to the Dutch National Museum was fake. It was petrified wood. How did NASA mistake wood for a moon rock? Or did someone switch them? And if one is fake, how many others are? The truth is, we may never know what really happened in 1969. The evidence has been destroyed, the witnesses silenced, the records classified or lost. But the inconsistencies remain. The questions persist. The fear in the astronauts' eyes when they're asked about the moon is real. Perhaps we never went, and the greatest hoax in history was perpetrated to win a political war. Or perhaps we did go, and what we found was so horrifying that the truth had to be buried forever. Either way, we've been lied to. Either way, something terrible happened. And maybe, just maybe, we're better off not knowing. After everything you've seen, everything you've heard, do you still believe the official story? Can you look at those photographs, listen to those astronauts, and accept that everything was exactly as they said? The moon watches us every night, silent, waiting, keeping its secrets. What do you think really happened in 1969? Share your theories in the comments. Subscribe to this channel for more investigations into the mysteries they don't want you to know about. And watch our last video to continue exploring the unexplainable. Remember, the truth is out there. But sometimes the truth is too terrible to face. Until next time, keep questioning everything.